Welcome, everyone. It's really great to see you all here. Thank you for attending this Zoom poetry reading. We're very excited with our wonderful poets. Yeah, on behalf of Bauhan Publishing, we'd just like to welcome you. Um, this is meant to be kind of a an interactive event. So if after the poets have read a poem, if you have questions or if you have comments, then if you go down to the bar on the bottom of your screen, there should be a hand raising reaction. So if you want to raise your hand if you have questions or comments, um, and then unmute so that you can question or comment. Um, Also, if you look in the chat, you'll see that we have an option or a link to buy the books from these poets, which I will just mention is free shipping. So you just have to pay for the book. You do not have to pay shipping, which is pretty awesome. All right. Do we think we're ready to get into the introductions? Excellent. All right, let me just pull that up. Um, so our first poet, Kimberly Cloutier Green, her poems have been published in several literary journals, most recently the Maine Review, the New Orleans Review, 9 Mile Magazine, and Calyx Journal. Her honors include grants and fellowships from the Maine Community Foundation, Bread Loaf Writers Conference, MacDowell, and Hawthornden Literary Retreat. She is a former lecturer in the English department at UNH and was the 13th Poet Laureate of Portsmouth NH. She produces the Rice Pudding Poetry podcast in Maine, and her most recent book, Openings for Light to Pass Through, was described by former Maine Poet Laureate Stuart Kestenbaum as follows. Kimberly Cloutier Green's poems bring me to my senses. Her eyes are always wide open, and she's describing the world around her in ways that surprise me. How does she do this? Her language is vital and musical, and she creates places where joy and sorrow travel together. The depth of her experiences anchor these poems. She looks at the world with wonder, and we are rewarded for it. So that's just an introduction of Kimberly. And then our second poet, Catherine Arnold. Catherine Arnold grew up in Cheshire in the northwest of England. Her poems and prose have appeared in the Cincinnati Review, the Gettysburg Review, Natural Bridge, and Prairie Schooner, among other publications. In April 2023, her debut poetry collection, Receipt for Lost Words, was published by Bauhan Publishing after winning the May Sarton New Hampshire Poetry Prize. Her new book of poetry, The Apple Tree, will be published by Bauhan Publishing in spring 2025. This is how the poet Heather Tressler describes that book. Catherine Arnold's poems perform the sensitive work of a linguistic Geiger counter, revealing radioactive elements within domestic interiors, familial repressions, acts of maternal devotion, and art's impulse. Marked by longing and observation of the human and natural worlds, the narrator of these poems gathers up shafts of light and pulsing energy in the everyday, turning them into word spells that help us weather the disenchantment and reenchantment we often experience in everyday life. These poems achieve, in their seasoned maturity, wise equanimity, clear sight, and a sustaining version of the truth. Catherine lives with her family in New England. All right. I believe we are ready to take it away then. So without further ado, Kimberly, if you want to start reading.
Thank you so much, Moses, for those lovely introductions, and thank you for facilitating. Thank you, Sarah Bowen, for being such a wonderful publisher and human being. And thank you all for being here with us because, wow, your presence is so beautiful to see. I'm so grateful. And this is a conversation. This reading is both a reading and a conversation. And we hope I know that there are many poets among you, and we're hoping that you'll be interested in this whole question of the experience of time on the page and how we accomplish that as writers. I think it's a great privilege of being a writer that we can move back in time and sit in the present or move forward in time. And of course, there are lots of different experiences of time, fast time and slow time, and time even as space, a kind of sense of spaciousness. Time can feel like it opens out or closes down. We can talk about time as horizontal, linear, sequential, or vertical, sort of opening out and somehow magically in any given moment having the sense of the eternal uh, on the page. So all of those things are things that we hope to maybe touch in on in one way or another. And then um, please, please join us in that reflection. We'll be happy to hear from you. So the first poem in this reading that Catherine and I are doing together, and before I go forward, I guess I really want to say what a great honor it is to be reading with Catherine Arnold. And I'm very excited to hear her reading this evening and to be talking about her poems with her.
And I feel the same way reading with you, Kimberly.
Thank you. So this is Choosing Hearts. The only thing I'll say about this at the outset is that I wrote this during the lockdown of during the pandemic. And oddly, during that, my dream life was very, very active during that time, as it may have been for many of you. And I kept having this sort of recurring dream of going out. We weren't supposed to go anywhere. And I kept having this recurring dream of going out and kind of heading into town and going into public spaces and joining others in around food and drink and conversation. And so this poem is one in that series of dreams. Choosing Hearts. It's called Choosing Hearts. In the dream, she can choose which lung, which liver, from those that hang like dresses in her closet, which kidney, which colon, more than one of each, so there's redundancy. So like her, this hedging of bets. Things do wear out. It's foolproof, choosing from two, so safe, like plenty of time. Today, she's choosing hearts, identical, same maker, but one's acquired a pajamas all day look and feel, which is cozy, sure, but sluggish, full of denial. Picking this one pretty much guarantees a surfeit of TV, solitaire, chip, hours at the window waiting for mail. Asking nothing, it would thump its regular path to the kitchen and couch, curl up with the cat for an afternoon nap, or tuck into that book. Its title escapes her, about the woman, red hair, who had only one heart, and it broke or she died. Sorry plot. So she chooses the one that races a bit, zips long up the back and clings. Tiny capacitor charms glitter in the sleeves. Tiers of rose-colored silk swish at the hem. Plush, she thinks, slipping it on. The tiny electrical storms in its chambers, bluely atmospheric. Not ticker, not pump, more dance, a tango. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow, all sway and dip. This is the heart she glides out in, barefoot, the rain incidental, streetlights like yellow chrysanthemums lustering the road. Her feet make slapping sounds, a music contrapuntal to the rhymes of this heart, beat that turns its back on sorrow, jumps the track and sucks the marrow, never mind the straight and narrow. Rhythm that stops at the corner diner, even late it's open, steamy and loud. One empty stool left, she'll make a new friend. And there's coffee and cake, spongy and tart. Like a wish, she whispers to the woman beside her, sliding the plate and fork for a taste. And their talk until closing. We've made it this far. Our hearts are still choosing, with good company and time in lavish measure. So, I think in terms of time, the the only thing I would say about this poem is that, and I hope perhaps you heard this, the first part of it, the first two stanzas, are fairly stable in terms of time. There's even a kind of slowness, a kind of dullness to the experience being described. and the two stanzas are fairly stable in terms of line length and so on. But then the poem sort of opens out as she slips on this second heart, and a kind of dance-like rhythm begins to enter in, and the sentences start sort of compounding. There's compound sentence stacking after compound sentence after compound sentence, and that the other thing that I would say about this, and I will share with you that though I was intentional about the compound sentences and the stacking of those experiences, it wasn't until preparing for this conversation that I noticed that in that section too, there are trochees and iambs back and forth, and trochees kind of convey this sort of incantatory thing, and iambs are smoother and more natural. The iambs have a rising rhythm, trochees have a falling rhythm, and so there's this galumphing kind of effect that's achieved that way. So yeah, that's Choosing Hearts.
Yes, this is one of my favorite poems, Kimberly. I loved the image of I see it as a huge closet, just going in and choosing the hanging hearts and picking them out like strange garments. And a couple of things occur to me about the time. The first is actually that when I read this aloud, I actually had a very different sense of the time, because I naturally seem to speed up at certain points and slow down at other points. But still, I had that general sense of the first two stanzas being fairly, you called it stable or regular, and then a definite speeding up, where she puts on the glittery, sumptuous, fun-loving heart. And when you say, so it seems to really speed up at the tiny electrical storms in its chambers, bluely atmospheric, not ticker, not pump, more a dance, a tango, slow, slow, quick, quick, slow, all sway and dip. It's so noticeable there, the rhythm, especially. I love the way that you actually have the words slow, slow, quick, quick, slow, so that you can't possibly not see the sense of rhythm as you're imagining somebody, I suppose, literally wrapped up in their heart, dancing around to the music. I also noticed that the parts in italics, beat that turns its back on sorrow, jumps the track and sucks the marrow, never mind the straight and narrow. That has a really strong rum-ti-tum sort of galumphing, like a refrain. And then in the final section about the diner, which I loved, and I wonder if that was partly because this was written during the pandemic. So the idea of going out and eating in a diner was so tempting. And even though it's not exactly about speed, the words there, there's coffee and cake, spongy and tart. There is a very strong rhythm there. And I suppose, as we'll see going on with other poems, you talked about how time can be horizontal, expanding, or vertical, sort of stacked tightly on itself and withholding, or there's the circular time. But there's also that sort of, I think very strongly in a sense of rhythm, and swaying and moving around. So that has a really good sense of dance in it and rhythm. Shall I go on and read my next one, or?
Yes, okay. Please.
So my first poem is called Love Poem, Daughter. And I think I won't say anything, I'll just start reading it. Extortionate and painful love. The trampoline jumps and ditches and returns. She holds up her elbow to be kissed, jutting out one, then the other, like a winged, bony butterfly. And now let us rock, and now let us dance, and now kiss my elbow. The elbow is the hinge, the turning of the arm. The occasional pronouncement spelled out with a finger on the keys, painstaking and always true. The turn of the head, her head turning to look back over her shoulder, the bright darkness of the calculating eye, affection crashing through her body, tearing off my hat, hurling it upon the floor, each gesture a flourishing, a rip-roaring gesture of the small-town theatre circuit. Throws it on the floor, pulls me bodily toward her, and, looking into my eyes, pupil to pupil, like snaps homing on a coat, willing me not to look away, aiming her lips at the middle of my forehead where my cyclops eye would be, drilling her mouth into the skin there, as if to bore straight through to my scold mind, the looping pandemonium, and then another kiss and another, storming through and thinking her hands grip, her eyes stay locked. There is no escape. I would not want it. Abundance. So just in case that this isn't clear, since I'm reading this at random, thinking about time, my daughter doesn't speak, so she communicates occasionally by typing. To me, this has a very definite speeding up as I describe the actions of my daughter's body. So I think it starts off with the first stanza is regular or stable, to use Kimberly's word. And then there's this very fast section around the middle where my daughter Stella is moving. Actually, there's this one line before that where it says, and now let us rock, and now let us dance, and now kiss my elbow, which was very deliberately trying to echo the sense of rocking back and forth in the words. And then in the section, affection crashing through her body, tearing off my hat, hurling it upon the floor, each gesture a flourishing, a rip-roaring gesture of the small town theatre circuit, throws it on the floor. So then I wanted to make the verbs really strong, which I think is one thing that creates a sense of urgency, and urgency is part of speed. And then also just the sense of a body moving through space with great intensity. And so the words there are really emphatic words, tearing off, hurling, and they're fairly short words with gaps between them. So that's why I chose this poem, thinking about time. Any thoughts, Kimberly?
Oh yes, I love this poem. And one of the things I noticed about the poem is that now in the first stanza, it's like a drum beat. And then what happens in that middle section, I have to sort of, if it didn't become obvious in my last bit of yak, I'm kind of nerdy about grammar. So some of that little nerdiness is going to come through. There are these wonderful present participles: calculating, flourishing, tearing, looking, willing. Suddenly we're in the action, action in progress. So we're just caught up in the swirl of activity through the middle part of that poem. And that's part of what gives the sense of urgency. And but my favorite thing about this poem is, and you have to imagine, like, if you were watching a film, do you know how sometimes if you're watching a film, there's one still figure in the film, but around the figure there's moving, there's a sense of swirling and blurring background. Do you know what I'm talking about? This poem has that in first we get this I. The I is the still point in the action. The calculating I, looking into my eyes, my cyclops eye, the eyes stay locked, so that I, which is, I think, the I, EYE, and the I is to the poem as a whole, but as a centering or grounding, or almost like a stake through the poem, holding it in place while all this swirling activity is going on, is quite marvelous.
It's really interesting that you noticed that. And I suppose part of that is because if you live in very close quarters with someone who doesn't speak, the I becomes even more of a communicative organ than it always is, because if you don't know what somebody is thinking, most of the time you look in their eyes, and if that person, my daughter in this case, looks you back in the eye very, very closely, then there's so much intensity in that communication. So that would be, it's very interesting that you caught that emphasis on the eye.
It might be a good idea to stop here and say that, Catherine and I have each other's books. We've been able to spend a fair amount of time with these poems, but you're hearing them, for the first time. And so please feel free at any time to jump in with an image or a sense of something happening in the poem that felt it had a pulse for you in some kind of way, because it doesn't have, the conversation have to be as nerdy as I am, or, or as, as closely read as Catherine and I are.
Could I jump in for a second?
Yes,
Please.
yes, please do it.
The beginning of the poem, Catherine, I love extortionate and painful love. And I immediately thought of something. We began at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is when my two dogs get their treats. I gave them early so they wouldn't be disrupting everything. And I was sitting watching them eat the treats. And there's something about a moment with creatures you love when it really is like something pinning you down, and I just didn't want to ever stop watching them eat their treats. And you really capture beautifully that sense of love as being a prisoner, but a willing one, a happy one.
Yes, yes, which I think is definitely part of love. Being in a prisoner, but not wanting to be let out of jail, which is, yes, in the final sentence,
Right.
I think. Yes. Kimberly, do you want to read Homing?
I will. So I worked for several years in the Stratford County Jail, and I worked with women writers there. And this poem comes out of that experience, and it's in 7 short-ish sections. And what I'm trying to do in this poem is capture a sense of the voices, the experience, and time itself as it's experienced in the jail. It's a very abstract poem, so it's meant. I'm not. I know that you will struggle to follow it in a linear way or a sequential way, because it isn't offered that way. It's offered in a much more disjunctive way, and it's meant to convey a sense of the emotional life of these women through some of these more abstract images. So this is called Homing. And the sections are divided by asterisks, but I'm going to say 1, 2, 3. That way you'll know where we are. Homing. 1. Who do you think you are? He asks, unglued, unclued, his fic wholly rhetorical. I'm an apple and I fall far, a dreamer, a fever, a stray. Girl still settling into her skin, all legs and the urge to run toward a largeness I have no name for. I'm a waif with holes in my pockets, no bread, no honey to feed or appease you. A wound, a wonder, and the slap that comes after. The silence, too, that sliver of blue. When you ask who you think I am the one you forget who belongs to you. 2. Last light and the bird unpeep. New phase and the tide unneaps. Neither here nor there, no clasp, no knot. Every tie unloop before it's not. Home's a slurry halftone, unringing itself, outrunning itself. Past wish bare as a bleached white bone, even a hungry dog lets go of. 3. Sometimes the quicks cage, and I count linoleum paces, the blocks in the walls. Hard to tell which eye's the ticking clock, which eye's the clock that stops. Clink, clink of my chain, clink, clink of the rain. Letters come, I count them. Don't come, I count. We have a pit in our stomach. It wants to be touched. It wants to be whispered. It wants the buzzing yellow lights turned out. The guard watches all this. We look like sleep. He places a wreath of wool for the dead. My hair grows long and I tie it up, let it down, tie it up again. I sit near the door. All doors are palaces. They have chambers, click, gardens, click, and wings. 5. Once I saw bluebirds scissor down from the sky, 8, 10 of them, light in a tree. I held my breath. Then they lifted as one and were gone. What I recall is their verticality, day with a blue bolt through it, pin on a hinge that binds once and now, lost and found. I've forgotten if I'm at 5 or 6. Sometimes you knock a nest down. You can't help it. The beak-bound grass and twigs, your own hair woven in, all that effort, selection, and time, and you break the fragile cup with its few tiny eggs, greenish blue and flecked with black, that smash at your feet and make no sound. 6. Homing, you know this, is finding your way back. By ear, by scent, by light, by field. Every hard to say word, a compass, a map on thin as skin paper pinned to your sleeve. It's knowing where home is and going to it. But home's the thing you knew last by leaving. 7. Then the one I turned my back on sees me coming and pulls the dog, ragged and reeking, from under the house, where she's waited and waited for my return. And she runs to me. That God runs to me, all mange and scar, her eyes 2 moons in a cataract darkness, to press her warmth into me, make us one flesh, lick all black gums and tongue, my hair, my face, my hands and feet, because I stink too. I stink through and through, and this is at last a beginning. This dog, this 4-legged no name, Mercy, who walks me the rest of the only way home. So I think the only thing I would say about time in this poem is that I hope it captures how endless time felt in that place. And I tried to evoke that through these very disjunctive sections, going forward and back in time. The stanzas are actually very stable. It's only that last section that seems to speed up, where the speaker returns home and is met by this dog, and that feels much quicker there at the end to me, because there's a kind of freedom, an actual freedom in it.
Yes, that's exactly how it struck me as well. And for me, in the first 2 pages, there is a sense of time suspended, horribly, relentlessly suspended. And there are words that you deliberately repeat, which seems like a very simple mechanism, but it works. When you say the clink, clink of my chain, the plink, plink of the rain. And then later, all doors are palaces. They have chambers, click, gardens, click, and wings. That sense of almost like a metronome, or the door of the cell closing. And there's also a sense with the different voices that it's a little like a chorus of disembodied voices, which leads me to see a sort of hopelessness, even if I didn't know that it was set in jail. But then that all changes in that final half page, which I loved. And you have several references to dogs in your poems, Kimberly, and you're going to read another one that has a dog in it. And whenever a dog appears, and I also have a dog in one of the poems I'm going to read, but whenever a dog makes an appearance, there's an inevitable speeding up because of that sense of joy and wild exhilaration, and the absolute incredible significance of every single moment. And then the love, which you didn't feel throughout the rest of the poem. It was love was withheld, and that was part of the punishment. And then at the end, love is delivered with the dog running towards her. It's just a very poignant use of speed and urgency, and I think filling the emptiness that was there before. So this had a very strong sense of time to me. Anybody else have any thoughts? Or
How about Catherine, your next poem, The Last Meal, is it?
yes. Okay. The Last Meal. And this was written in memory of my mother-in-law. So it's dedicated to Selma Putterman, 1930 to 2008. And this was the last memory that I have of my mother-in-law with my daughter before my mother-in-law died suddenly. The last meal we ate together. I see Selma slicing strawberry pie, choosing the most succulent parts, dropping them onto Stella's plate, murmuring words, not words that order or describe, words as binding warmth, words as swaddling cloth. Face of my heart, she said to Stella, face of my heart. Scent of strawberries, juice of strawberries, mixing with the words, the partiality of memory, melting in the mouth, recombining, two faces, each intent upon the other, two faces above the tines of a single fork, two faces waiting to be hatched again into a new wonder and a different song. Mm. So this one is a slow poem. I think to me there's a sense of time, but it's not an obviously measured time in the sense of speeding up, slowing down. It's a sort of slow passing of time. There's a sense of sadness to it, and also of cherishing something. And so naturally, I noticed that when I read it quite slowly, perhaps because that goes with the sense of longing, and it's something of an elegy. It sounds a little grand, but it's a short, tribute, which has something of an elegy, and so it's natural that the word that just came to me was abides. It just abides in its space and it slowly fills it up. And the words tend to brush into each other softly. It's very different from Kimberly, for example, the appearance of the dog in the last poem, where it was all this and that and dun and dun and dun. This is very different from that. It's just a sort of silky, brushing, gentle quality of the words. None of that sort of bumping force that the fast bits have. But what are your impressions?
Yeah, so this poem is so intimate. And in fact, this is a good place, I think, maybe to stop and say something about, that there's the pace of reading. When we as poets read poems, we can with our own voices and the volume of our voices give a sense of speed or of urgency in how we read the poem. So there's the pace of the reading, which is one thing. But there's also, I think, there's the world of time, space and time within the life of the poem. And those can be two different things. You could read this poem very, very quickly. And in fact, you read it more quickly than I hear it when I read it. You could read this poem very quickly and it would still have that closeness, that intimacy, that very, very close sharing of the strawberries and pie. Also there, for me, there's this biblical resonance as well of the last meal and what happens in that cherishing and in that blessing and in that farewelling. And so that was very beautiful for me. And another way in which I think this is intimate and slow is in the repetition, the way it shows up here: face of my heart, two faces, scent of strawberries, juice of strawberries, two faces. And, I think about when we're parting from a loved one, how we become very, we repeat our farewells. We repeat the same words. I love you. As if we only the simplest words of love remain in a moment like that. And the poem is very beautiful and has beautiful language. And there's this feeling of farewelling that is so beautiful to me.
Yes. I was just thinking when you say that in many ways, when we recall people that we've lost, it often comes down to just a few phrases that are repeated in our minds, which come to be a sort of talisman representing that person. And that's one of the ones for me: face of my heart, face of my heart.
So beautiful.
That's a beautiful expression. And it's your turn, Kimberly.
Yes, except I see a hand up. Monica.
Oh.
I wondered if a poem in which there are very few objects or persons or acts, just a few things, tends rather naturally to this slowing down of time. And in a setting where there are more objects and things to be moved around and experienced, time, I don't know if it would naturally be speeded up, but I do feel quite strongly the slowing down that goes with concentration on just one or two things, like strawberries, and faces. I don't, just maybe there's no general rule.
No, I yes, I think I see what you mean. It's a question of focus. So if you focus on, it's like having an object in a museum case You focus on the thing under the light, and there are no distractions, and distractions tend to create well, a sense of sort of skipping around from thing to thing. It can be very involving, or it can be superficial, but yes, if you concentrate on one thing, whether it's a fork with a bit of pastry and strawberry on it that's being shared by two people, or whether it's a moment of clarity that opens out in a poem, or whether it's one object in a museum case, I think that it does create a sense of spareness, and that does slow down time. That's an interesting thought, yes.
I love that, Monica. That was really helpful to me. It's a wonderful idea. and I think it generally holds up. This idea that one or two, a closer field of attention, a couple of objects, a figure two. Yeah. Thank you for that idea. This next poem is called Hawk, comma, crab. And I'm just going to read. It's very short, and it has very short lines. Hawk, crab. Not only the startled hawk, rocketing, reeling up from the wind-whipped water, but also the crab, all white, large as the bird, and tied to the raptor's body, so tightly they rise in a whirling blur of beak and claw, carapace, feather, a single winged and suffering body that swerves, jerks, suddenly dives down and thrusts itself skyward again. Equal cravings bound in knots of sea rack and rope, each straining for its opposite element. Entanglement even I can feel, watching alone on the old town pier and pointing, shouting, flapping my arms at terror in every direction. And I think I just want to say two things about this poem. One is what Monica just said, which I hadn't thought about before, but it fits perfectly in thinking about this poem. It's such a close focus on this very strange thing. It also happens to be one sentence. You all can't see that, but it's one sentence beginning to end. So what happens is that within the sentence, it's a modifying clause after a modifying clause after a modifying clause, and so you never let go. You can't let go of the thing you're looking at.
Yes, I had exactly the same thought. After Monica made her observation, I thought, yes, this is very, very close focus. It's just on these two bodies as they fall down through the sky, which also, since it's this long, continuous sentence, that reflects this sense of falling and falling and falling and falling with the raptor and the crab. They're plummeting to earth, but what's interesting is, and it's really odd how when I read it, and this is, I mean, when I say anybody except the writer Kimberly, we all read it with our own sense of rhythm. And so then when I heard you read it, Kimberly, it was quite surprisingly, because you read it more slowly, naturally, than I do. So it has a slightly different effect of time. But what's interesting is, even when you read it, and you read it relatively slowly, and even with the idea that it's a focus on one act, one embrace, it still has a sense of fastness to it. It still has a sense of speed, even when you read it slowly, and even when there's this close focus. I don't know if that's perhaps because the mind following along just automatically provides this sense of I keep using the word speed, but just accelerating time. You automatically put that in there because you know that these are two bodies falling through space. And this is very vertical space. So, and there were a couple of lines where I really felt that sort of plummeting aspect in whirling blur of beak and claw. And then when you say that swerves, jerks, suddenly dives down, it really plunges further with those words. So that's what struck me.
Thank you, Catherine. You know what, I want you to know that those of you who are coming up with some really wonderful ideas about how we could have done this, including the text on the screen, I think that's such a good idea for a, you know, next time when poets are reading and having this kind of conversation. It would be terrific to be able to see the text. Yeah, so thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah.
Catherine, are you going to move on to Life Jacket?
Yes. So I'll just jump right into it. Life Jacket. Mine. It is pure, this memory. I sink down into it. Yet it is hard to get the difficulties clear, to strike them cleanly, match after match. I remember the suck and breath of the water advancing and receding, the hairy rinded flesh clinging to the stony walls. I remember painting in the cave, sitting inside the scooped out rock, sitting on a stone ledge, the water lapping over my booted feet, the crinkling light. I remember painting in a cave, the chilly wetness spreading through my thighs, my knees flaring outwards, crooking sharply into flaking walls, a canvas balanced on my knees, a life jacket with brushes stuck through the belt, pulling each one out of my soft armor, my inflatable skin. This is the closest I can come to swallowing the painting. I must change into a different creature, not relying on names or words that I throw over the landscape, using them like nets to haul the truth home, always restless to stand up with an explanation. I need to become invertebrate, an octopus perhaps, trailing my delighted limbs across these trenches filled with easy spilling pigment. And that was a poem that I wrote about one of my favorite painting experiences when I did a painting, obviously, in a cave. And so it was a cave on the coast of Ireland. And as I sat there, the water rose and lapped on the edges of the cave and then slowly fell. And in terms of time with this poem, I don't think that it's either fast or slow, but what I notice, and I don't know how deliberate, it's always a good question how deliberate it is, the sense by which one creates speed or a sense of time. I think when I write the poem, it may not be very deliberate, but when I revise it, that's when I decide whether does that create the right sense of rhythm, the right sense of time. And with this one, I wanted there to be a sense in the poem of time flowing and time lapping. So it goes in and it goes out. And it's neither fast nor slow, but there's just this in and out flow. Flow in two ways. The flow of the water, obviously lapping against the rock, which is also very womb-like, like a heart beating. And then there's also the sense of flow when you're painting. And apparently that's actually a thing now. People use the word flow to describe that sense of concentration that you have when you're doing creative work. And so the flow the water in the cave was like an externalization of the flow of my mind while I was painting. And so I wanted this to have a sort of circular rhythm or a lapping rhythm. So that's why I chose that poem for this theme.
I love that. I love that lapping rhythm, the water, the flow. Yes, absolutely. All of that's there. I have to say, I just love the moment in this poem when we get to, and this is the third stanza, I remember painting in a cave, because up until that moment, we don't really know where we are. So there's this kind of we begin in dislocation and kind of like, where are we? What's happening? And in fact, I'm not sure, at least as I read the poem, I wasn't sure I was entirely safe. And I loved that. I loved that feeling of being uncertain about where I was and not sure I was safe. And in fact, I'm in a place where there's water and rock, stony walls, and water coming in, and she's wearing a life jacket. So there's a tenuousness to this, but then this desire to eat. This is my favorite moment in the poem, to eat the canvas, to eat the painting. And that whole section is so strange and wonderful. And so for me, this is a really good poem that gets close to that idea of vertical time where things just open up and become so strange, and a sense of oneness, or at least a reached chord oneness. I love, love, love what happens in this poem. Yeah. Alice, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that not having a sense that Catherine was literally painting with brush and canvas, this took me back in time. I thought it was an ancient imagery of a cave painter and wishing to be able to flow out like a different animal. So it really shot me way back into a really ancient space. And that's a different poem for me than what you're saying, which is like so cool. So
yeah, that's great.
It's great.
Thank you.
So we each have two more poems, and we're going to try to finish up around 8. We might go a little bit over. This one's called Body in a Blue Field. It's also about painting. Body in a blue field. This figure has let slip her silk robe, but her near nakedness is incidental. Wrapped in blue light, her luminous gaze hints at a lavish attention. She is a blue body in a blue field, and the field is every blue, cornflower, cerulean, shades that drift in slow waves through her mind and scatter. A color is never seen as it truly is, and this is some of her pleasure. The rest is that it touches her, this light, the way his brush traces without haste, trembling, almost not touching her face, her throat and breasts, the blue length of her thigh. How hard he tries to capture, not sapphire, not lapis, a sky interior to her, a radiance her body draws its shape from, like timbre or mood, more sensed than seen, every fleck only partly true. Close your eyes, she thinks, but doesn't say, to feel how they stream the myriad hues, given, extravagant, through every boundary of body and field, deepen, disperse across infinite space, appear, disappear, reappear, now azure, now indigo, here and here and here. I think all I want to say about this poem, you can't see this, but there are tons of dashes in this poem. And so punctuation too controls time. Dashes, are create these sort of abrupt pauses and suggest a change in thought or focus. So there's a lot of that in this poem, and that slows everything down. I was trying to have things kind of inch forward and then kind of get pulled back to create a sense of tension, time as tension, that it might speed up a little bit and slow down a little bit to kind of mimic a seduction, eroticism, the interior experience of seeing and being seen, the difficulty of knowing another. And also I wanted to kind of try to capture what Catherine captures in her previous poem, that kind of opening out of space, wider and wider and wider, the interior life of the model being its own space. Yeah.
Yes, and in general, I'm going to try to speak less so that we don't get don't run too late. So, but that was my feeling too with this one, that there was a wide open sense of space, and there is an intensity, but there's also, to me in this one, I haven't seen the painting, and there isn't a painting here, but I see the figure or the model as lying down on a grassy hill, and there's actually possibly spread-eagled, with just this sense of expansion and slowness and lack of resolution. So it's a sort of floating sense of time for me. This one has, and there's no period. You can't, this is why we should have the poems up, which we'll do next time, but there's no period at the end, so it's just open.
Thank you, Catherine. Bill.
Yeah, the blues really got me in this one. I mean, I pictured Stephen's blue guitar and some of Picasso's blue period. So really that sensory element was very, very powerful. It kept coming back. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the poem that I'm going to read, Trapped, is from the final section of my book, which is was inspired by the pandemic. It's called The Sleepless Eye. Trapped. The boy stopped, young over his boots. The terrible start of it. A punch that cleared the morning light. Beauty caught and cracked. Red fur. Eyes stretched in pain. If you took pain, if you could touch pain, if it became a palpable thing and you bowled it like a weighted ball toward the brain, I saw it hit home, crash into the animal's skull. The summer I was 9, tramping with the boy across the acres of his farm, walking side by side, rubber boots shoving their way like blunt black muzzles through the thick grass. We were looking for traps. The poachers set them in the flat-framed fields. I pictured rabbits, tufts of silky fur, waiting. We would release them. Fox. I thought it was alive. I can see its raging eyes. The eyes a gas flame blue, a shock of white tearing, twisting through. I reached out to touch the fur, found a noose I hadn't seen, a snag of wire, death circling, tightening around its throat. I thought it was alive, thought I could see that deranging pain, still hot in its flickering eye. I reached out, touched its fur, trying to catch it and return it to the moment before its soul pressed through. For years, I didn't think about it. Then in 2020, when disease was spreading, fixing us, snaring us, so that I felt as if I could chew my own feet, I was walking along the path beside the creek, I saw the sun roaring through the fall trees, a sugar maple taking fire, red-orange leaves, red pelt jumping through, and it came back to me, that stricken, captive face. Details came back I had forgotten. The matted fur around its throat, slippery, dark, fingered into points and styled with blood. That year, the plague year, the year of loneliness, I dreamt that face through the night, the cub, again. 40 nights, perhaps, in that forsaken year, 40 twistings and relivings, my own thoughts noosed, anxiety straining at my throat, startling again. I see its eyes, its outraged face, its fear, an education in cruelty. And they trundled out the bodies, wheeling across the screen again and again, until I turned away, until I saw the creature's face again, the slaughtered beauty. And so that year we turned against each other, and I looked back at our cruelty unmasked. With this one, the reason that I chose this in terms of time, apart from the idea of present time and something that happened many decades ago, and so those times being spliced into each other, being haunted by the past, but also there was a time very particular to COVID, a sense of time being just suspended, this blur without the usual organizing sort of frame of the week and the weekend. And instead, it was this long, uninterrupted, dreary yet frightening blur, whereas in the memory of the fox, there was this complete contrast of, on the one hand, the sense of being arrested in shock. You know, time stops when you're experiencing shock. And then there's this very quick rhythm to the bit where it says, eyes stretched in pain, if you took pain, if you could touch pain, if it became a palpable thing and you bowled it like a weighted ball toward the brain, I saw it crash into the animal's skull. So Kimberly.
Yeah, this is just such a knockout poem. I think I want to pick a thread from what you just said about the splicing, because that's what really I thought was so stunning here, is the splicing of time, this early experience of encountering the trap fox. And then, you know, when we get to that line about feeling like you could chew your own feet, which just knocked me out. And so there's not only the splicing of time, but there's the, you know, the fox and the eye, right? The kind of this hybrid creature that the poem somehow holds, and all in the context of horror. It feels epic to me. The poem feels very like it tells a whole history. So in that sense, there's a slowness to it, but there are sections of it that are quite shocking and quick in their impress. Yeah.
Yes. If nobody has any questions, perhaps you should go right on to playing stick, Kimberly.
Yes, and I won't discuss this one. I'm just offering it as a way to close. And I want to thank you all again so much for being here with us. What an incredible honor. So many of your faces dear to me, and really grateful for your attention. Thank you. Kind attention. This is called Playing Stick. He's all urgent eye and torqued joy, willing to play at this small obedience. Sit. Bit of theater her round of stick opens with. This dog's no wink-wink hipster, no cheeky seen-it-all ironist, laughing at the joke and then at everyone who doesn't get it. This game's infinite, sincere, beginning in attention, his eye on the stick. No winners, losers, just this momentary wait for the toss and run. She waves it in the air like a wand, wag of magic, but the mesmer's not in the stick. It's her word, fetch, which in dog etymology means find your way, bring back and marry, as in make a golden ring of away and return. And there it is, her wind-up stride and whip and the sticks in the air, slicing through all that blue ether along an arc he knows without once looking up, and she marvels at this, his genius, the law of falling bodies, inborn. And see how he dashes to the drop, and he's never far off. Oh, homeless soul, a cry she doesn't utter, but for a split second shudders through her, until he turns, all slobbery flews and whiskers, back for her. Some ancient wolfish gene remembering survival, how cold it was before they made a wedding of it. Thank you all.
It's such a beautiful poem, Kimberly. And it's so doggy. I mean,
It's so doggy.
The sense of dog is so strong. And before I read mine, I'm just going to read those last lines again, because I think they're really beautiful. Oh, homeless soul, a cry she doesn't utter, but for a split second shudders through her, until he turns all slobbery flews and whiskers back for her. Some ancient wolfish gene remembering survival, how cold it was before they made a wedding of it. So that's lovely. Thank you to everybody for coming and hearing us read our poem. So this is my last one. And this is also from the COVID section. It's called Each Small Castle Window. Words held, scared, inside our separate houses. Fear lined and bottled on the windowsills. I'm walking at dusk past the trapping houses, trying to decode the secrets of their fronts, the clue of light that burns in each small castle window, walking down the emptied COVID streets between the silent voices, when a car whooshes by, shooting through the window the cannon of an ecstatic, nosy head, a loopy, walrus, woolly dog, grinning, streaming, wild hair, a master of the pantomime joy thesaurus, shedding wonder, love, cruising it through the brittle air. This poem is for dogs, with nostrils as delicate as ferns, who stormed the quiet line of my despair.
Bravo. I just noticed and hadn't noticed before. Did you say the thesaurus? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the poem very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, you have a thesaurus in your dog poem, and I have a dictionary in mine.
Yes, that's right. I don't know why that should be. Perhaps it's an attempt to find just somehow to express the nature of dog. It's very hard to find.
Yes, this joy thesaurus. It's fantastic. I love the opening there at the end after this sort of very sorrowful beginning, and it all just, the joy pours in. Beautiful.
Yes, I remember very clearly walking along those frozen early COVID streets, end of March and April. And then suddenly, exactly as described, this huge woolly dog came by with its nose from the window and just completely changed everything. So
The best. Thank you all. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, and thanks again to everyone. I recognize some faces, Richard and Christian and Doug, although I can't see you, and Rebecca. and Monica. So yeah, and to everyone, thank you so much for coming.
Mm.